you have one chance to get up before your hands and legs are losing power, and then you can just lie there and hope you had a good life.
What is it about polar exploration? What is it about it that called to you?
It's extremely dynamic. It's extremely fascinating when you're out there. You have to walk across pressure ridges. Sometimes the ice opens up and you see that dark water that reminds you that you're actually skiing on top of an ocean. You have polar bears lurking around, and you're always drifting. You never wake up in the same place. So I think it's the the dramatic landscape and the nature that appeals to me in a way. You are totally dependent on yourself and what you have to bring with you.
I get that this is hard. Like, I understand that it's hard, but I don't really understand it. Is there a way you could like put it in perspective? Like, okay, how difficult is this to kind of really travel in these places?
Yeah, okay, for instance, the North Pole, it's from the coast to the North Pole, which is the treks that I have done mostly. And also I've done some crossing all over Antarctica and the Arctic. So it's 1,000 kilometers, and I'm bringing everything I need for the whole journey. So my sled, close to 300 pounds, I guess, to be self-supplied all along the way. And there is huge pressure ridges because the ice is moving and is crushing together that you have to climb across. And I did mention also the open water that you sometimes have to paddle or swim across. So it is extremely, extremely difficult and hard on your body, and maybe sometimes also your mind. I also have to add the extreme cold that you have, down to minus 40. And to be able to master those kind of situations all alone by yourself for 2 months, self-supplied, is a great satisfaction simply. That's one of the things that appeals to me.
Is it more physically or mentally demanding?
I think for solo treks up there, it's more mental. You are alone with all your decisions, all your worries. You have to be the patient and doctor in the same person. You have to pull yourself up from that hole that you sometimes fall into when you are by yourself and everything looks dark and you're afraid of being alone, and you're longing for home and you're not sure if you're going to make it or not. And then you have to try to motivate yourself, to keep on going the next day and the next day and the next day. So I think it's mostly mental on solo treks. But when that is said, the mental and the solo part is also the best part of the whole trip when you are able to master it, because you do get a totally different dialogue with yourself and the nature when there is no one else to lean on and to rely on. So it's also a kind of meditation, I think, on these trips that enables you to get closer to yourself and also closer to nature and maybe the universe.
Like, I couldn't imagine being, I know one of your trips where you were basically alone going across for what, roughly 60 days. Does that wear on you? Are you like, do you get sick of just being by yourself essentially?
No, not really. Well, I think if you are able to make it the first couple of weeks and you get into the flow, then it doesn't really matter if the trip takes 1 month or 3 months. I think you have been able to become friends with yourself and the nature. And when you reach that stage in yourself, then it doesn't matter how long the trip takes. The first couple of weeks is critical in my experience. When you come from a warm bed, you have said goodbye to your friends, and you just take the first steps out on that ice with a super heavy sled and maybe 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles to go. Those first days, that's the hard part. And then that's when you really, really need to dig deep.
Did you ever think about just turning right around right at the beginning? Like, oh man.
Yeah, of course. Well, in one way, yes, and also no. I've been in situations in the start when I thought that, wow, this is never going to work, but at the same time, I didn't want to give up because I told everyone that I was going to ski alone to the North Pole, so I could just throw in the towel. But I was not able to really find a good way to continue. But what I did back then was to fool myself further. I said to myself, okay, what's the reality here? It's not your leg that's broken. It's not your ski that's broken. This is all about feelings, and feelings will change if you give it some time. And I said that, okay, you can give up, but not today. Tomorrow, but not today. Knowing that feelings will change over time. And when tomorrow came, I said the same thing. And after a couple of weeks, I thought, okay, well, I've been here 2 weeks. Maybe I can continue all the way. And then I started to lift my head and think about the goal. So I think it's possible to work on your feelings, even if you are in a tight spot and think it's hopeless and you're not going to make it. It is possible to work on your feelings.
What was that like when you saw another person after all that time?
Strange. You become a stranger to other people in a way. Other people becomes you don't know how to behave. It takes a while actually to know how to relate with other people when you've been away for a long time.
It is amazing our capacity to adjust.
It is
like
incredible.
We just get used to whatever situation that we're in.
So that the capacity is what makes us unique, I think.
I don't know obviously very much about the North Pole or the South Pole, but when I imagine it, like I am just imagining a long, white, flat tundra.
Well, the South Pole is a little bit like that. The South Pole is just a huge, enormous ice cap, basically, and enormous distances. It's more or less the same every day, and that's why I also think that a big trip in Antarctica is more a mental challenge because the landscape is so monotone. But on the North Pole, it's a lot more that happens because of the pack ice. You're actually skiing. Maybe most people are not really aware that at the North Pole itself, it's more than 4,000 meter deep ocean. It's just a thin layer of ice on the top there that you're skiing on top, and just a thin frozen kind of pancake that is moving around and creating all these fissures and cracks and big towers of ice because of the enormous force up there. So North Pole is never boring, or it's more like you have to watch yourself all the step on the way. But Antarctica can be a little bit more of a mental challenge just because of that enormous landscape. It's so big. But even in Antarctica, I'm able to penetrate that lonely landscape, and I do find in the snow there is fissures and shapes in the snow, so it's still possible to penetrate that landscape and kind of become friends with Antarctica, but it takes a while.
When you're in the North Pole, so like you'd essentially camp for the night and then end up in a different location because the ice is moving?
You always drift somewhere at the North Pole. It's a very dynamic place. When you pitch your tent, you have drifted from just a few hundred meters maybe on a quiet night and up to several miles if it's a stormy night. And it's really the wind that is pushing on the ice, making it drift up there. So because all this jagged ice, the pressure ridges, as we call them, they stick up and they become like sails pushed with the wind, and the ice starts to drift because of the wind.
So then how do you account for that, right? Because that seems like, man, you got to have every variable figured out before you start, but then who knows how far you're going to drift on any given day.
You never know. So you just have to walk straight north because you don't know how far you're going to drift. In most cases, it evens out in the end of the day. Sometimes you have the drift with you. Other times you're actually drifting back. And I've been in situations when I woke up after a big storm and I drifted 20 kilometers backwards, so 15 miles backwards. So everything I skied the day before was just lost to drifting back. So it was, that was a bit depressing.
Was there a few cuss words? I would imagine they're like,
Yeah, but at the same time, when the weather is bad, I'm drifting back and things like that. I actually get more motivated because I can't do anything about it. The only thing I can influence is my own performance. So actually, I get more kind of, well, this is a job, and I have to just to stick it out and do my best. And that's also the kind of the mental capacity you need to bring in the front of your head, because if you're just sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, you won't make it, and you can't change it. You can't do anything about the weather. You only can influence your own performance.
so how much preparation goes in to an expedition like the ones that you've been on?
About a year, at least. The long first ever expedition takes a long time to prepare, because I have to try to find the answer to how to do it, basically. And the last big trip I did was crossing the Arctic Ocean in the dark with my good friend Mike Horn from South Africa, and then nobody had done it like that. We had to find the right time of year to do it. We need to figure out how much food we were going to bring, and how many batteries. We knew most of the trip was going to be in the dark, so we needed batteries for our headlamps for 2-3 months, and lots of interesting problems that we had to dive into and find solutions to. So it took about a year to prepare.
Now, why do it in the dark?
Yeah, why do it in the dark? Oh, the reason is that yeah. To start out with, we wanted really to do a classical North Pole expedition, just like the old explorers did back in the days, from the Golden Age and the late 1800s and early 1900s, and to go all the way from Alaska to Norway via the North Pole. And to do that, the only time of year you can penetrate far enough into the polar ocean by boat is in the end of the summer, really kind of September, because that's when the ice has melted enough that we're able to sail into the Arctic Ocean with a sailing ship and get onto the ice. But that also means that winter is coming. Winter is coming in September as well. So that little tiny window between winter and summer, that's what we had to find. But that also meant that most of this trip was going to be in the dark, because the sun goes down at the North Pole 23rd of September, and then it doesn't rise again for another 6 months. So there were a few challenges that we had to overcome on that trip, but we managed to do it. It took us 87 days to cross the Arctic Ocean on skis in the winter.
Is it? I've only seen videos. Is it dark? Like, okay, it's dark, or is it kind of?
In the beginning, when the sun goes down, it's kind of twilight for a couple of weeks, because the sun doesn't go down like in equator. It doesn't go down in a sack. It goes very slowly along the horizon. But when it's far enough down there, then it gets completely black. When it's overcast and you turn off your headlamp, you don't see your friend sitting next to you. That's how dark it gets. But you also get clear nights when you have full moon, and then you can actually see a little bit what's around you, but you'd still need the headlamp to see the fissures in the snow and all the dangers that lurks around. So you need headlamps. So we were on headlamps for 2 months on that trip, actually. And then you need a good battery system, because without headlamps you will not survive.
Yeah, how did you bring enough batteries for that?
Yeah, it's just we brought 10 kilos of batteries.
I don't know if I can quantify this, right? But like when you go on one of those expeditions, like how much leeway are you generally giving yourself, in the sense of like, okay, I've got food for 85 days, but if this lasts 89, I'm done.
10 days margin. And I honestly thought that the trip would take 75 days. That's why we took 85. But we we had a little bit of a challenge with the weather, and we were drifting back more than expected. So that's why the trip actually took 87 days instead of 75. And my sled broke, lots of things happened. And my friend Mike, he went through the ice and into the ice cold water. So that took another day. So we kind of lost days in a lot of different situations, and ended up with really pushing the envelope towards the end there. So, but I barely made it.
Man.
It was a close call towards the end there. I had half a liter of fuel left when we got to the boat.
What is that like when you end the expedition and see, like, there's the finish line?
We had the ship that we were skiing towards that had sailed up from Norway and into the ocean on the other side, as far into the ice that the open water would take her. So the ship couldn't get any further north, so we had to reach that ship. That was our way out of the Polar Ocean. And when you get closer to that goal, and it's just like, everything you dreamt of is inside that ship. And suddenly when you reach it, there is nothing more to long for. So it's a big paradox, I feel, to reach a goal like that, and that everything is within reach. You can eat as much as you want. You can take that shower you have been longing for, and there is a bed. And it's a huge paradox. It's very, very strange to reach that goal on a big trip like that.
Does it make regular life boring, though, in any way, right? Like on Tuesday, I was up here at the North Pole, trekking across, moving ice, and now it's Thursday and I got to do taxes.
No, I don't think so. But I heard some other kind of colleagues of mine thinking those lines or ways, but I don't do that. I think it's also because I feel privileged. I feel so privileged that I have my family, my friends, and everything around me. No one can kind of be in the moment all the time, and you can't expect that. So that is why it's so important to break off sometimes and just go out into the nature.
Are you ready for some harder/listener submitted questions?
Sure.
North Pole or South Pole? Which one's your favorite?
I would say the North Pole, simply because it's so dynamic. Yeah, and also that's where I've done my biggest expeditions. So definitely the North Pole. Yeah, there's more things happening at the North Pole.
What food did you crave the most while traveling?
You get so hungry on those big trips out there, and you crave for anything with fat inside. So big American pancakes with blueberry jam and maple syrup and sour cream, bacon, yeah, on the side. That goes down, and that's something you dream about.
After going on an expedition for almost 90 days with somebody, do you feel like you've heard everything that person has to say?
Yeah, in a way.
What was your scariest experience out there?
That's connected with water, going through the water, or through thin ice and into the water on the North Pole. That's happened one time all the way, and several times near misses. And if it's minus 40, you don't have much time before you get too weak to get up again. And almost all the big accidents at the North Pole has, fatal accidents where people die, has been in connection with thin ice and water.
When those kind of incidents have happened, is it usually somebody wasn't prepared, or because they just got unlucky?
No, well, speaking for myself, you get tired, and there can be snow covering some of these traps, so you don't see them, accidents just happens. But also maybe it can also happen because you take too big risks, which is always a balance. You can't reach the North Pole without taking some risk, and you have to find balance between what risk is acceptable and what is too much. And when you're solo, you don't have anyone else, to guide you to say, okay, hey, stop, this is too dangerous. So you really have to. So that's also why it's so dangerous to be alone, because you get a little bit sloppy and it's into the routine, and then one day you take that risk that is too big, and then maybe that's it. So that's always kind of a battle in your head. But you probably don't know that, but my profession back in the days, I was a deep sea diver in the oil industry. And what I learned, I did that for 10 years, and with saturation diving, as it's called, diving down to 1,000 feet and super deep and in the dark, and lots of accidents. But what we knew, who worked down there in the dark in these oil fields, was that the only one you really can trust is yourself. So I always looked upon safety as a personal responsibility. And that I took that, attitude with me into the expeditions. And I think the secret is to be that little step ahead of yourself all the time. Try to understand what is happening before it happens. And if something goes wrong, you have trained for it. I train. I'm going out on thin ice, and I'm going through thin ice deliberately back home here in Norway, just to find out the right techniques to get up again. So you have to be able to go into a dangerous situation and do it in a safe way by training. That's my philosophy.
Is there any kind of forgiveness, I guess, in those kind of places? Is there any kind of like, okay, you can make a little mistake and you can get away with it, or like, you can't mess up at all here?
No. Especially not on solo expeditions. When you're with other people, you normally have an extra helping hand to pull you up, but not on solo expedition. Then you have one chance to get up before your hands and legs are losing power, and then you can just lie there and hope you had a good life and think back, but that's it.
That's the height of pressure, right? Like, I've got one chance to get out of this, and if I don't, I'm done.
That's it.
Do you think that the poles could become like Everest, in the sense that there could be kind of an over-commercialization of them at all?
Yeah, it's actually turning into that. Especially in Antarctica, there is quite a lot of skiers and people flying into the South Pole just to be there. So that has really, really changed compared to when I did my first expedition up there in 1990. Then North Pole was just mentally just super, super far away. Nobody went there. But now it's actually possible to go to both poles and drink a glass of champagne and go back home. So yeah, the same thing is happening. Do you,
when like the times that you've been back since those first expeditions, like, can you see changes?
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge change compared to, when I did the first expeditions in the early 90s, the ice was 3 to 4 meter thick. Now it's 1 to 2 meter, and also the coverage is about 30% less. So actually on the North Pole, that is where you are physically seeing the result of climate change. So it's really just a totally different landscape compared to 30, 40 years ago.
Any other big expeditions? You think you got any really big ones left?
Well, for me, I'm doing a project called Ice Legacy. I'm doing it together with a friend of mine called Vincent Colliard, and where we're crossing the biggest ice caps in the world to sort of try to tell what is happening with these huge pieces of ice. So that's what we're doing, trying to cross the 20 biggest ice caps. So the next goal will most likely be Juneau Icefield in Alaska. Not too far from you guys.
Is there kind of a holy grail of polar exploration left? Is there something that, like, this is, if somebody does this is going to be big?
Yeah, there is not many left since I've been fortunate enough to kind of pull off most of them. but or a few of them. But there is one left, and that is to ski to the South Pole during wintertime. That has been tried, but no one has succeeded. So that's up for grabs if anyone wants to have a go.
Is that something though that like, okay, that's doable, or like you could do this, but I don't think you're coming back?
I think it's doable, but it's extremely difficult. But as the knowledge kind of increases and the equipment gets better, but you can imagine that in the winter on the South Pole Plateau, it's down to minus 60 degrees Celsius. And you have strong wind in addition. I think you would have to ski more or less inside the box to be able to survive up there. But I think it's possible. But I'm not going to try it. I'll leave that to someone coming behind me.
That's pretty much all the questions that we have. Is there anything that you think that we missed, or what's kind of coming up next for you? How can people learn more?
Yeah, no, I think we covered quite a lot. This nice talk that we have. Thank you very, very much. The place, if people want to see more of what we're doing, I have a website called Ousland.com, Ousland.com. So that's one place that people can have a look, and or my Instagram and Facebook profiles.